Literally before our call, I saw a post from the SaaStr founder, Jason Lemkin, and he was talking about how he's getting a lot of pitches around AI SDRs. Like nobody
Yeah,
wants to do sales anymore.
yeah.
I
I
think
saw the same post.
it's
Yeah, it's funny. I think being in sales, it's a hill that like I am willing to die on.
Hmm,
I just feel so strongly against the idea of using AI to replace humans. I
hmm,
think there are, especially in sales, like I think, and it doesn't just come from me being a sales rep and a sales leader and seeing all of that. I think that understanding sales, it's really about that human to human connection. And at the core of sales has always been people talking to people. And that's what I've always told my sales reps is yes, it's scary to pick up the phone. It's scary to cold call people, but at the end of the day, you're just talking to another human being on the other line. It is nothing to panic about. And now I think seeing so much of the rise of, which I think AI has tons of great use cases in sales that like it's really good at. I don't think email personalization and like replacing humans is one of them. I
yeah,
see it on my day to day. This stage, you do things that don't scale, right? And so I personalize every email that I send. Like
yeah,
people think that the idea, like that concept takes hours to do per person, but it takes me 2 or 3 minutes. And one, it's kind of fun. Like it sounds cheesy, but like when I'm looking at someone's LinkedIn profile and figuring out what I want to use, like personalize, I
yeah,
actually find myself like cracking a smile because I'm like, oh, this is a good one. Oh, this is, and it's the fun in sales, but also the responses that I get. I doubt any AI SDR out there is receiving responses from people saying, hey, really great email, not interested. And I
yeah,
get the like I get those, or hey, that was a really well thought out email. Thank you for taking the time to write it.
yeah.
I'd love to learn more, whatever the result may be. And so I think that there's still that like need for human to human connection. And especially in the increasingly digital world we live in, it's easy to think we can replace people, but that's what sales is. It's humans building relationships with humans.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, people buy from people. They take the decision emotionally. It's not just rational, right? And if you take the emotions out of it, like if you take the person out of it, I wouldn't feel the love for the bot that I feel for a person.
100%. And who wants that? I think back to, I've sat through so many sales pitches myself, right? Like leading sales teams. And it's funny when I think back to who are the people that we ended up moving forward with in doing business. It wasn't because, yes, they had a good product, but it wasn't about the brand. It wasn't about those more broad senses. It was like I'm sitting on a call with someone probably for the next like few weeks that I'm going to have to chat with. Do I actually like this person? Do I feel like I can have a conversation with them? And I think that's like critically important. Like your solution is a dime a dozen. Like it's not very often nowadays where you're the only person
Yeah.
building in your category. And so what differentiates you is, do I actually like the person I'm working with? Am I willing to go to bat for them internally within my company? I'm putting my reputation at risk by pushing this deal forward. And I'm not going to do that for someone that I don't like or a bot. And so there is such a like human connection is so critically important.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no Rolex for SaaS, I guess.
Yeah, no, 100%.
In this episode, I speak with Justin Bianchini, founder and CEO of Coachable AI. Justin grew Bungalow from 400k ARR to 50 million ARR before starting Coachable and has spent a little over a decade in sales. Hey, Justin, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, Vishesh, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So we actually have not met in person before. I think Jonathan, another Antler alum who I met in Austin, introduced us, and we've had a couple of conversations around Coachable and around what you've been doing in the past. Would you tell us a little bit about what Coachable is and what are you solving for your customers?
Yeah, absolutely happy to. So, for me personally, like after being a sales leader for almost 10 years, and I was sales rep, sales leader, now a founder, I always just struggled with what were the problems that my sales team actually has? And it was always about finding that time to dedicate personalized, attention to improving their skills. How can I actually help them get better in their conversations and their conversion rates? And there really hasn't been solutions out there. And so while I was a head of sales at Main Street, kept getting all of these pitches for new AI tools. It was AI for lead generation, email personalization, CRM updates. And I really wanted to focus on how do I make my team better. So I left to start Coachable, which provides sales reps with lifelike customer simulation role plays that they can use to practice cold calls, discovery meetings, and then get immediate feedback and coaching on their performance. So we're really looking to use AI to elevate sales reps' potential, improve their skills, their performance, and really provide them that career growth that they're looking for.
Hmm. Yeah, it's refreshing to see something like this because a lot of people are focusing on the obvious use cases for Gen AI. Specifically for what you are doing, how does a user engage? What kind of training do you provide?
Yeah, so there were obviously being in the industry, there were a lot of things that went through my mind of
Yeah.
things that I've experienced. It was a lot of the tools out there today take a long time to onboard, long time to integrate. You have to build out a lot of these processes and workflows. And so I wanted to make sure it was as simple as possible. So for sales reps today, you can sign up for an account with Coachable, drop into your first simulation within 2 minutes, and it's personalized specifically to your buyer persona. So we take your website URL that you're selling for, we generate these unique personas, and then every conversation is infinitely unique. And so from there, you can run through full cold call conversations, full discovery meetings, and you're going to get infinitely unique options of objections thrown your way, product questions, pain points, and really challenging users to provide the benefits that they would to a real prospect, and not just these reactive solutions that exist today of learning from your mistakes after they've already been made. This provides you the opportunity to do that ahead of time. And then afterwards, you get complete scorecard that's very similar to what a manager may provide to their team. We score you in a couple different areas depending on the call type, and then dive even deeper into showing you what are your areas of strengths, what are those areas of opportunity, and how can you actually improve? What are like actionable tips that you can take and alternative strategies to try out on your next calls?
Interesting. And you even simulate closing or
Yeah, it's funny hearing the feedback from users because I use it a lot, obviously, not only being the founder, but also selling myself. And so I'm in there all the time. And it, starts to become second nature, even having been in sales for so long. But hearing from users that tried out the first time, they're like, I didn't expect the AI to be that difficult. Or like I thought that what I told them was going to be compelling. And you're not always going to be able to book the meeting with the AI prospects, similar to the real world, right? You're going to get rejections. You're going to get hung up on if you're not compelling enough and aren't building that relationship. And so it's really built around replicating that real world experience so that, you can build your confidence, and you may get hung up on, and that's okay because that happens in the real world, but it's about bouncing back. So there are plenty of times that I don't book the meeting and I feel like I did a really good job, and then I go back and look at the feedback and coaching and I'm like, oh shoot, it's right. Like I probably should have listened to that pain point and pushed on that a little bit more than I did, and maybe I would have been successful.
nice. That's interesting. Hung up on by AI.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's probably one of the hardest things I think sales reps deal with, right? Like
Yeah.
rejection is a reality, and it's more often the reality. It would be great if everyone we were talking to wanted the product that we're selling. And so
Yeah.
getting used to that and seeing the different use cases, like people like to use it in the morning to warm up before they hop on the phones and have to cold call, or before they're hopping on Zoom calls with prospects. Like it gives you that opportunity to get those jitters out of the way. Maybe you fumble through a couple things and you can warm up, or preparing for an interview where you have to do a mock call. I think there's so many great use cases that we've seen even over the last year that are just really exciting for sales reps and individual founders to use when they're selling their own product.
Oh yeah, warm up is such a good use case. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Because picking up that phone and that first call is definitely harder.
It's the worst. I mean, even if you're cold calling every day, like you'll see so many people out there will push cold calling off till the afternoon, and
Yeah.
then it normally doesn't happen. But because it's who wants to be rejected, right? And I think even when you look at sales in general, I think about this a lot. I hate cold calling. And I've been in sales for 10 years. And I don't think you have to enjoy cold calling people to be successful in sales. And I think there's plenty of people out there that do like it. But for most people, that fear of rejection is scary. That fear of, am I bothering someone is scary. And so getting in front of something like Coachable and being able to get those like kind of fears and jitters out in the morning, I think it's been so like wild to watch.
Hmm. How did you transition? What was the motivation to actually start? This is your first startup. Uh,
First,
what made you take that leap?
my career journey has been really interesting. I originally from the Midwest, really got started in sales in mortgage banking, worked for Quicken Loans or now Rocket Mortgage, and had the opportunity to work for this billion-dollar company that had a lot of money to spend on sales training, but went to a couple different startups from there. Always had the startup bug. I joined Bungalow as one of their first sales hire. One of the first 10 employees, was director of sales there. We scaled really fast. This was in 2017 I joined. And so over 5 years, we scaled to 50 million in ARR, built out the go-to-market org there, and just had the opportunity to learn so much about startup life, sales, but also was so fortunate enough to not only work with talented people, but wear so many different hats and get exposure to product, get exposure to engineering and Salesforce and implementing processes and building them out. And so went from there to another startup called Main Street, where I was head of sales, rebuilt the go-to-market org there, and then left to pursue this when I saw such a critical gap in the market.
How big is the team right now?
Yeah, so at Coachable, it's just myself. So solo founder, started working on this full time about 9 months ago when I left Main Street to pursue this. And I think for me, I had a really interesting journey. I was a non-technical founder, strong sales background, business background, had never wrote a line of code in my life. And so most people, and myself included, initially I was like, well, wait, who's going to build this? I need a technical co-founder. I need an engineer. I need to do something here.
Yeah.
And the market, especially with AI, was shifting so rapidly. And I was like, you know what? I've worked with so many product teams, so many great engineers. I'm going to teach myself to code. And I ended up building the product out myself. And, you know, there were times when I thought that was crazy. And a month in or a month and a half in, where I was like, what am I doing? I can't code this whole thing. Like, how am I going to figure this out? And what if I hit a roadblock where I just wasted 2 months, but was able to figure it out? And so built the product from the ground up that users are using today, which is wild when I think back. And it's funny, I still consider myself a non-technical founder. And all my friends are like, stop saying that. Like, you literally coded something that like people are using and paying for. That's a wild thing, and it's just me. And that's not to say that I will never hire a technical co-founder. Like, I think there are benefits to being a solo founder, but there are also drawbacks. And so I've experienced both of those, and I think that there's still a need in the near future to bring on technical talent to really ramp up and grow Coachable.
Do you already have revenue? I know you have users. Are they paying users or are there still pilots going on?
We do have paying users, which is also mind blowing to me when I think that. So we have much through all organic means of cold outreach, organic, just posting on LinkedIn, like all of the different free channels that you can think of, right? As a bootstrap founder, I don't have the luxury of getting to spend tons of money on marketing. Like, the
Yeah.
marketing is me, and it's reaching out to people one on one, and it's building those relationships and finding those pain points. And so have been lucky enough to have a really good response from the sales reps we've reached out to so far. We've, helped over 100 sales reps use the platform and tons of active users. And somehow still mind blowing to me, the product I built is now generating revenue, which is great.
And so for some of the early founders, can you describe the journey of, because when you reach out early, you reach out with test users with free trials or maybe a pilot or uh, how was that journey and what was the pitch originally and how did you convert them to paying customers?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey, and I think it's easy to see the 0.1% of startups that grow to 100,000 users upon launch, right? Or they launch on Product Hunt and a million people are using it.
Yeah,
it it's that doesn't happen
it doesn't
often.
happen. Yeah.
It's easy to compare yourselves to them and to think, oh, I'm doing something wrong. But it took a lot of iteration. It took a lot of segmentation. And by no means will I even say today that I have it figured out, right? Because things change. And I think when I look at when I first launched the product, I was really focused on how can I help sales leaders? That's who I was. And I was feeling the pain of not being able to provide that one on one coaching, that personalized attention. And there was a massive gap there. And the more sales leaders that I talked to, they recognized that that pain existed, but it wasn't a large enough pain for them. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, how does this not, this solves the problems you have? But it wasn't a priority for them.
Yeah.
And so from there, it was, let me take some of that messaging and let me continue to iterate and start to look. And who doesn't want to try to go enterprise, right? So I did, like, who doesn't want to land $100,000 plus contract out the gate? And so started talking to people who were bringing on large training teams and onboarding 100 sales reps at once and needed help scaling uh, their role plays and their simulations and their practice, and they're doing it all manual today. And the pain point existed there. However, enterprise sales cycles are long.
Yeah.
Budgets get done once a year. It's hard to break through when you don't have brand recognition or any massive pilots under your belt. And so as I started to kind of think through what is the core segment of who I want to serve and looking at more of the like studies that were coming out within sales, it was really interesting to see. And Outreach just had a really good study, and Salesforce just released one too about kind of the state of sales for 2024. And when you look at what are the main areas that sales reps need help with, more than 40% of them highlight closing and help on calls, managing calls, having conversations. But when you look at the priorities that sales leaders mention, those two ranked really low. It was top of funnel, it was lead generation. And so it became very apparent that there's a really underserved market here in sales reps. They want to get better at their role. And so I was like, let me start talking to more of the individual users and the reps and went after them to understand, is this something they would use? And that's where we've seen so much of the success.
And so right now you're directly selling to the reps.
Yeah, exactly. We're going right to the end user. And it's a lot of, it's a lot of cold email. And I could probably debate till I'm blue in the face of whether or not outbound is dead. A lot of people will tell you it is. And I post about this a lot about how outbound isn't dead, but it could be for you if you don't know what you're doing. And that doesn't necessarily mean there's a tried and true playbook.
Mm.
But I reach out to individual sales reps, and my focus, I think what was important was focusing on what are the key segments. Like the market today for me is not just every sales rep under the sun, right? It's specific segments within the sales community of who needs something like Coachable today. It's sales reps that are starting out in their role for the first time within the last 90 days. The stats show most of the time they're not getting the support they need, but they're looking for it, right? They're either hiring sales trainers, sales coaches, they're taking courses, whatever that may be. And so sales reps new in their role, really critical. Job seeking sales reps, right? Sales reps out of work. There's a lot of turnover in sales. And in an interview, you have to do these role plays and these mock calls with hiring managers. And that's hard if you're not familiar with the company. And so using something like Coachable to practice that, I think has been a game changer. And then, like I talked about, founder led sales, like that's been a really big one too. These people who have never had to sell before in their lives, a lot of times they're technical founders who are only used to coding and have
Yeah.
never had to actually have a conversation about their product. And I'm sure you can relate to that one. And so it's really hyper focusing on these segments, understanding what are the actual pain points, and then reaching out to them directly with personalized messages. It's not just blanket sending.
Yeah. Yeah. The cold reach out that you're doing now, you must have iterated on the messaging. Can you talk about how to get the messaging right?
Yeah, I think I'll be the first to say, like, I don't think And there's a lot of people out there that will provide you, you know, purchase my template, purchase my course, purchase my playbook, and
Templates.
it's going to solve all your, yeah, it's going to solve all your problems. And even me being in sales, I open up LinkedIn a lot, obviously, and I
Yeah.
open it, and even my head spins with the amount of content that is out there and the amount of tips and tricks. And I think it's important for people to realize these tips and tricks work, right? Like
Yeah.
they can work, but you have to find what works for you. And that has to be authentic. It has to be natural. It has to feel comfortable. There's no template out there that you can use that is going to guarantee meetings for you, right?
Yep.
And I think for me personally, even being in sales, I tend to be long winded. I like to over talk about things. And that was one of the biggest things that I had to go through when crafting these emails. Like you only have, if you can get someone's attention to open your email, you only have 15 or 20 seconds, right? And
Right.
so the best things you can do are you got to break it down into two big areas, right? And it sounds intuitive when you talk through it, but most people don't recognize this. The subject line drives your open rates. Plain and simple, right? That is what captures people's attention and determines if they open your email. And so don't ever change your subject line and the copy because you're never going to understand what is working and what's not. The messaging isn't going to resonate with every single sales rep new in their role, but I remember being that person and being a new sales rep. What did I want to do? I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to make sure I was on the radar and like crushing it in performance, especially those first 90 days. And so my subject line is tailored around that motivation, right? And
Hmm.
it's, are you making your mark at the company that you're at? And we see really high open rates with those emails because it resonates with the person that I'm reaching out to. And then the second main piece outside of the subject line is the copy, right? That generates whatever your action is, whether you're looking for them to book a meeting, reply, click a demo video, and it has to be clear and concise. You don't have the luxury of people's attention for paragraphs upon paragraphs. And so I like to structure it with key paragraphs that are really brief. It's one, why am I reaching out to this person specifically? And what, like, why should they care? And that's that human touch that I mentioned of making it fun and understanding why that's the person that I want to reach out to. And if I can't find a reason, that's a good reason not to send the email, right? And so starting with why am I reaching out to them? Second one, give them a quick blurb on what Coachable does. How are other people using it? Whatever that may be for your audience. And then third, make it really simple with a CTA, your call to action. I see a lot of emails and I receive a lot of cold emails that provide me an attachment, provide me a demo video, provide me the link to book. And it's, as a buyer, what do you want me to do here? Am I supposed to reply to you? Am I supposed to click this? What is the action you want? And so make it as simple as possible. Like three quick paragraphs. Those could be 1 to 2 sentences, doesn't need to be long, but what's in it for them? Why are you reaching out to them? What do you do that's going to help them? And what's that call to action that you want them to take?
We're talking so much about AI, but it's amazing how intuitive we are as a species. When you read an email, if it's a bot, fakeness comes through. If the other person is not genuine or authentic, that comes through spot on. It has to be authentic. You have to make sure that the messaging resonates.
And I think, I joke around about this sometimes, but then I kind of like laugh until I cry and think this may actually be the future. Like, I don't, I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years, right, AI has taken over email completely, where like companies' value props are actually all of our emails are human crafted, or like we have
Yeah.
humans in the process, because everything is cyclical, right? Like
Yeah.
even in sales, like we look back to what was sales in the early days. It was door to door, right? It was knocking on doors. And as we've kind of progressed and over the last, let's call it 20 years, we've moved more into this digital world where, sure, maybe not every buyer needs to talk to a human. That's okay. That's their choice. Like you can make it as easy as possible for them to sign up. But you were, especially as you're going up market to mid-market enterprise sales, it's only going to become more critical. And you see a lot of this with some of the platforms out there that do gift giving or gift sending,
Yep.
right? That's what people used to like. Think of the singing telegram, right? Like back in the day, like that is things people used to do in sales. And we're seeing that happen more and more. I don't think we go back to a world maybe where like people are golfing on the course to close deals, maybe. But I think that there's always going to be that desire and need for human connection in sales. And I think we're not far off from, I don't want to use the word bubble because there's always going to be automated outreach just happening in general. But I think we're going to see buyers really wanting that human connection and knowing that a human wrote the email. And I see that in the responses that I get from my emails.
People are getting fed up with a lot of generated content that's coming out, whether in email or social media or whatnot. I think it's gonna become very soon. It's gonna become a one-two approach, which is you probably meet and make that connection in person or on a phone, and then AI takes over some of the lifting.
There are so many great use cases for AI in sales, and I see them, and I think prospecting is a good one. Identify AI is really good at pattern matching and recognizing patterns in your unstructured data that you may not have. And so using it to look at your CRM and understand who are the prospects that we close the most, what are the characteristics and features of those people, and then how do we find more of those? That doesn't mean you're using AI to reach out to them or send emails, but it's helping you identify those things that would take humans a long time to do if they're able to do it at all. I think AI for data analysis, AI for prospecting, even AI for account research, right? Right now, my process is when I know I'm sending an email to someone, I pull them up, I go to their LinkedIn profile and I scan it and I look to see what's something that I can connect with them about or that relates to Coachable AI. Like, how can I use this in my outreach to personalize it? I think that AI can do a great job of pulling insights to let you know what you could potentially talk about. I don't think it's to the point where it should be crafting those personalized insights and crafting that message. But I think it could pull out those insights that you usually use and let you know, hey, here are a couple suggestions of things that you may want to relate to. And then I could take those and determine how to actually put that into my voice and make it authentic.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned you've scaled the team from almost inception to 50 million ARR. How do you identify and hire the right salespeople at early stage startups, especially for founders without a sales background? Like, how do they do a better job at that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question, right? And I think it's a hard one. It's really understanding what is it that you need in that moment and what is it that you're actually looking to get out of your first sales hire. And so if we're talking about potentially a sales co-founder or someone with as a business co-founder, you're looking for different things than you would look for in your first potential sales hire.
Hmm.
For me, I have God, probably interviewed hundreds of salespeople and made tons of hires. And I think, and even talking to founders that are like, I need to hire my first salesperson. Should I outsource it? Should I bring them in house? It's understanding where are you at as a company, right? There's no one stronger to sell the company or sell your company to buyers as yourself.
Yeah.
You have the passion. Nobody is ever going to be as passionate about it as
Yeah.
you. And so when you're looking to hire a salesperson, you have to recognize, am I doing this because I figured a lot of things out and I can transfer that knowledge to them and then they're going to be able to hit the ground running? Or am I looking to bring someone in because I don't really know what I'm doing and I need them to solve these problems that I have? And everyone experiences those thoughts. I mean, I experience those thoughts and I've,
Yeah.
been in sales for a while. And so I think when you're looking to hire for a salesperson, let's say that you've figured out some of these early signals, you can transfer that knowledge to your first sales hire. What you're going to need to find is someone that obviously has years of experience in sales. And the question is always, do I bring in a VP of sales? Do I bring in a founding account executive? What does that look like? Well, I think the thing you're going to get with a VP of sales, and I know tons of them, and they're great people, but at the beginning, you need these people to hustle, pick up the phone. They need to be cold calling. A lot of VPs of sales, heads of sales, directors of sales, myself included, we've been removed from the process for a really long time. Maybe we've been cold calls here and there, but for the most part, we haven't been doing that on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And so I think it's really important to bring on who's this salesperson that has the hustle, has the grind, wants to really crush it, believes in the mission, is passionate about what you're doing, that can replicate your excitement and what you're doing. And you just need to unleash them on the phones. And finding that person, is hard. For me, I always looked when I interviewed people to first 5 minutes of the conversation, I never talk anything about sales, your role, the interview, because I need to know, is this someone that I can connect with? We can
Yeah.
talk about anything other than sales. And is this someone that I want to have a conversation with and I want to have more conversations with? Because that's what is so key when these people are out there representing your product. And so I think looking for those people and screening for people who are currently picking up the phones, that are cold calling, that may probably have that fear of rejection, but are willing to push through it because they believe in your product. I think that's where you're going to see the most success. And they should report to you specifically so that you can provide them insights. They can give you the product feedback directly. After you get a couple salespeople, hire that VP of sales to come in that's willing to still put in the work, pick up the phones, but can provide a more strategic direction of testing messaging, bringing on the tools and platforms that you need, doing A/B tests and running the funnel.
Hmm. So you've scaled from a team of just you to what was the largest team when you left Bungalow?
Yeah, so when I left Bungalow Peak, like right before COVID, when we were really at our peak, we had about 55 people in our go to market org. That
Mm.
was across a couple different sales teams. It was SDRs, and we there at Bungalow we ran a B2B to C prop tech kind of marketplace for co-living and homeowners that were looking to rent their homes. And so we ran kind of a supply side AE team and SDR team that was very focused on cold calling, building those relationships and closing. And we ran more of a kind of transactional relationship building sales process on the demand side of the business. And so scaled a lot of those. I think the one thing that I wish I could have done more of, and maybe it's one of the reasons why Coachable is so important to me and helping people up level their skills.
Yeah.
As a startup, it's really hard to you don't have the luxury of time and you don't have the luxury of taking people new into sales and like training them from the ground up.
Mm.
And I made that mistake a couple times. And I think back to a couple salespeople that I've hired that in the interview, they checked all the boxes. They were fantastic to talk to and they were ready to hustle and ready to grind. And I was like, this is the person. And I would bring them on and I'd recognize, okay, wait, I don't actually have the time that I wish I did to,
Train them.
scale them from zero to one. And I think that for every sales leader, that's their goal, right? Like you wish that you could take anyone coachable, like the actual word, not the company name, but anyone that has coachability and turn them into this great sales rep. And hiring some of them, it gave me a really good opportunity to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses as working at startups, especially high growth ones.
Yeah.
Sales is a skill that like it's hard to learn on the fly. And some of these people that I hired that I mentioned, we ended up having to let go or they left on their own. And I remember telling one specifically, I was like, I want to help you get your next role. Like you need to find a company that has a really good sales training process in place. Like I experienced that at Quicken or at Rocket Mortgage. I need to find you that place because sales is in your blood. Like you're going to be really good at it.
Mm.
I just unfortunately can't do that. And I go on, I see them on LinkedIn now. Like they found that place. I think they maybe went to inside sales solar company or a cybersecurity company, but they found that place that provided them the training and now they're crushing it. They like are making President's Club. They are like they're really successful in their role. And as a sales leader, I wish that I could have been the one to help them get there, but you have to recognize like what you have time to do and what's feasible. And I think for me, it's we needed people that had some of that sales experience.
Yeah. That's where early stage startups now will have a easier time across functions, because now you could hire tools like Coachable or like a GitHub Copilot to actually have a few junior folks and have that luxury of a low touch coaching available to those people. Let's also talk a little bit about, at early stages, obviously the founding team has to sell a lot. It has to be a founder led sales, because one, you don't have the money to hire a sales team, and two, the product is in a shape where you actually need to intimately understand the customer, and that only happens through customer conversation to kind of shape the product. And if the founder is not involved, someone from outside won't really have the decision making that is needed to understand the conversations and take those calls. In your experience at early stages, what has worked in terms of founder led sales, and what would you recommend other founders, especially from non sales background, where sales doesn't come naturally to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because whether you have a sales background or not, you still run into a lot of the same problems, right? That the percentage of founders who probably pick up the phone to cold call for founder led sales is, I'm making up numbers here, but probably sub 5%. And that's maybe
Yeah.
being generous, right? Because we talked about like that fear of doing it.
Yeah.
But talking to customers is clearly the only way that it makes sense. And I think even in my sales career, and even now at Coachable, like when you're passionate about what you're doing and when you know you're solving a problem, you kind of get to reshape the mindset of sales, right? And it sounds cheesy. Like it sounds like it's some of these like mantras that you can say out loud and change your perspective, but it's not. If you are fundamentally helping people, you owe it to them, if you're targeting the right people, to get this in front of them. And why would you not be the best person to do that? And especially in the early days when for most people, like your product isn't built out fully, right? Or like
Yeah.
I mean, I look back like to the first version of Coachable that I built, and like it was somewhat embarrassing, right? And so, but you are the best person to sell that vision of here's what it looks like today, but this is where we're going, and this is how it's going to help you. And so I think talking to as many customers as possible without, I don't know, without ulterior motives of trying to sell them, right? If you're solving a problem for them, they will decide to use it naturally. And if they're not, then recognizing, hey, maybe this isn't the target segment, or maybe there's another segment that I should. So I think that's the first thing. I think in sales, rejection is hard. As a founder, it's 100 times harder, right? This is your like baby. Like the last thing you want to do is get feedback that people are saying it doesn't work. But that's where the nuggets are, I think, of opportunity. And we have the luxury today of iterating quickly, right? So when people come back and say, hey, this doesn't work for me, you can change these things really quickly. And I think back to, I mentioned the first version of Coachable that I had, and I remember being so scared and hesitant to put it out there.
Yeah.
And I demoed it to a good friend and who is now the founder of his own company. And I demoed it to him and he was like, why haven't you, like, why are people using this? This makes so much sense. Can I use it? And I was like, oh, that like panic set in. I was like, what if he hates it? What if it doesn't work? And I gave it to him. And the first thing that was so helpful was recognizing that it wasn't intuitive in what
Yeah.
you were supposed to do next, right? But it was intuitive because I was the only one who spent time doing it and I built it, I coded it. And so even those small things like become so helpful, but it's scary. But I think to start out, determining those target segments and like understanding, does it actually meet a pain point that they have? If you've walked in the shoes of those people, that's even better. But it's not to say that great people haven't built companies for something they've never experienced. You just have to talk to that many more people to understand what is their day to day and how does it work for them.
Being a solo founder is a whole different ball game, because investors don't really like solo founders for many reasons. What are some of the challenges that you've been facing so far as a solo founder?
When it comes to the investment perspective, very early on, before I was probably ready, My friends were like, hey, let me introduce you to this investor and have a conversation with this investor. And again, you like imagine the perfect path of what starting a company looks like. And it's, yeah, I'm going to raise money on an idea. This is a great idea. I have a strong background. And almost every conversation I went into was, okay, do you have a technical co founder? And
Yeah.
I would explain, I built it myself. And they were like, okay, but who's going to do the technical work? And that came up a lot. Still does. There's investors that I still stay in touch with
Yeah.
from months ago that they reach out and they say, hey, Justin, have you found a technical co-founder yet? And it's like, no, I'm not looking. Like that's like that's not what I'm focused on right now. And it's funny the questions that come up. But I think being a solo founder, it's it's exciting,
Hmm.
but it also is 10x the stress, right? I don't have someone that I can bounce ideas off of on a regular basis, or that when we're having a bad day or when I get 8 rejection emails from VCs and potential customers that like I can go to and they understand what we're going through, or that can provide that like extra motivation. But I do think that there are so many benefits that I've experienced. I think for me, I touched on when I first decided to start this, I thought, let me hire a technical co-founder. And if you asked me who was that person back in, November when I left full time, it was, oh, it has to be a full stack engineer, right? Like somebody that just codes, that maybe has some experience in product. And then a few months later, as I started thinking about it, it was like, okay, well, maybe it's more of an AI machine learning engineer, right? Like, how
Hmm.
can we actually take all of this data that we're able to capture from companies and teams and leverage that effectively in our own models? And these were areas that I didn't have experience in and had been starting to learn. But now I think I have such a more holistic view of it. And maybe this has been because I now have a product in market that people are using. But it's advice that I had always heard that felt competing to what VCs were, saying, and a lot of investors say, just find the right person you want to work with.
Yeah.
If you find someone skill agnostic, right? Yeah, it would be great if that person had all the technical skills that I needed. But when I look to bring on potentially a co-founder, that may be somebody also with go to market skills. That may be someone with marketing skills. That may end up being a person with technical skills. And I think it's more of who do you want to be in the trenches with and work next to and essentially be married to for the next 10, 15, 20 years, right? And
Yeah.
it'd be great if all the stars align and you get that like perfect skill set person. But I think a lot of people over optimize on skills, especially early on, and
Yeah.
especially when you're non-technical. And I think that there's so much opportunity now to, like, with the advancements of AI, to be able to get a product in market without needing to bring on their own person or hire like an outsourced firm to build it for you. I think even now, like it's great for me to be able to talk to a user. They have these suggestions and feedback, and some of them I can go in immediately and make a change
Yeah.
for.
Make a change.
And they're like, oh, that was super fast. And I never thought I'd be able to do that. Here I am. And so there's a lot of benefits. I have such a better understanding of how the product works that
Hmm.
it enables me to sell better because I like don't have to go ask someone else questions or don't have to take time to pass a product spec or something to others. And so, like I said, I obviously will still need technical talent. Like that is still going to be a need for the business. But in these early stages, it's been so beneficial.
Yeah, there's definitely less of a handoff for sure. I mean, everything is all in a single skull, but yeah, high pressure skull.
One thing to say too, though, I think Vishesh is like as a solo founder, it makes the like feedback and conversations with customers even that much more critical,
Yeah.
especially for someone like me. Like I'm built, like I am potentially the customer, right? Like
Yeah.
I am building for a problem that I had, which is fantastic. I'm also really close to the problem. And then also being really close to the code and building out the solution is fantastic. But it's sometimes hard to zoom back and say, am I building the right things? And so I think as a solo founder, what I found is you don't have that second person on the team to bounce ideas off of and kind of like pro con analysis and whiteboard. And so you almost, I almost operate as like my users become that second co-founder, right? Because they are the ones where I'm like, hey, here's an idea. What do you think about this? Or they provide an idea and I say, oh, I actually had that on the roadmap. Here's what I was thinking. How does that sound? Or how critical would this be for your use? And it becomes that much more important because I'm not just making the decisions on my own anymore. It's really involving kind of users in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, finding a co-founder is, like you said, like a marriage. When you force the issue, it becomes harder. If someone's not in your network who's interested, that you already know and already gel very well with, then it becomes a like marriage. It becomes a relationship exercise. You go, you date a few founders, and the journey. Investors do want to de-risk some of the risks that come with a solo founder, but at the same time, yeah, I wouldn't act on investment pressure. If you're genuinely at a stage where you feel like you do need someone, I think it's better to date and wait and figure out
Yeah.
who the right person is.
I agree with that 100%. And it kind of goes back to people are always going to have an opinion on
Yeah.
your business, your product, right? But there are a lot of advantages. Like, I don't want to say that I am like a staunch advocate of
So
solo founders. Like, there are a
yeah.
lot of advantages, right? Like, one thing that I think is just really key to call out as a solo founder is like, when I want to work on the product, I have to like when I'm
Oh,
coding, I have to trade off go to market,
yeah.
right? And I have to trade off other things that are
Yeah. I
also
agree.
high priority because I have to essentially balance it all. And I think that's a critical aspect to keep in mind. So I think there are a lot of benefits to
Having a
having a
co-founder.
co-founder. I don't think that it is impossible to build a successful company as a solo founder though.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely it becomes easier because plain and simple, nobody cares about the company as much as a founder does. And so if you have co-founders, you have multiple people who have that kind of passion and intent to push the company forward. So yeah, totally agree. If you could find a partner, yeah, nobody wants to be single. They might not want kids and hire more people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
nobody wants to be single.
it's a journey.
It is a journey. All right, we've covered a lot, but time for some rapid fire. If you're up for it.
Yeah, give me what you got. We'll see.
So, if you had to pitch Coachable to a room full of toddlers,
Hmm.
what would the opening line be?
Ooh, to a room full of toddlers.
Yeah.
Practice conversations with your dolls and not your parents.
Oh, that's a good one.
I mean, I think that's the best thing, right? If I was talking to salespeople, it's practice with AI, not your prospects. And so for toddlers, like practice with your dolls, and they're already doing that. So,
Cool. If you could hire any fictional character to be your co-founder from movies or novels or whatever, who would it be and why?
man, um, good one. I would.
That's a tough one, right?
That is a tough one because there's so many good ones, and I'm trying to think, do I wanna take would I hire for the really technical talent? Honestly, like, as much as the movie I think is so fascinating, it'd probably be Jordan Balfour from Wolf of Wall Street. I think
Oh,
that somebody that can continuously captivate an audience and is that vivacious and whatever your perspective is on him overall, I think he was fundamentally a good seller, right? And
yeah.
he connected with salespeople on a great level and still somewhat does. And so if I was looking to hit that like 100,000 users overnight, like he'd probably be the fastest path to get there.
Oh, wow. I didn't expect that. I thought you would pick someone technical. I don't know, Hugh Jackman from Swordfish or something.
Yeah, I thought about it, but I think like there's just so many risks in go to market, and especially in like
Yeah.
the early days of a business. Like sales is what makes or breaks a company. Like a lot of companies are out there selling Figma mockups and things, right? And
Yep.
so like the
Yep.
technical can
I've done
come,
that.
but the biggest risk area is always the go to market plan. And if you can get in front of users and drive revenue.
Yeah, makes sense. No, good choice. What's the most unusual thing you've done to close a deal so far? Well, I mean, from your past experience as well.
I so when I was doing mortgage banking, it was a lot. It's all about relationship building. And at Quicken Loans, it was we were selling mortgages over the phone, which was like an unheard of thing. Like most people, you go to your bank and you walk in and you talk to someone and you get a mortgage there. We were calling people over the phone, and so it was really, really powered by that relationship building. And one prospect, her name was Kathy. I actually talked about her before because she's stands out in my mind. Her husband owned a car dealership in Texas, and she was ready to go. She was bought in. We had talked for a long time, and she hit me with the, "Oh, I have to talk to my husband." And I was like, "Yeah, of course you do. We don't want to make the decision without him. This is a big decision." I said, "Can I call him at work?" She was like, "No, no, he's busy. Like, I'll talk to him tonight." And I was like, "Kathy, let me just call him." Called the husband at work, talked to him about it. He was on board, called her back, and she was still very hesitant, but she kept telling me I was like her family. She's like, "You remind me of my son." And I was like, let me give your kids a call. And I just knew I needed to build this relationship and needed to be ingrained kind of in the family because that's what was going to close the deal. And so I called and spoke to the whole family. And when we closed the deal for her mortgage, I was on speakerphone with the whole family in the house, and never thought that I'd be calling someone other than the prospect and reaching out to people, not even decision makers in the deal like her kids, but it worked. And like a lot of times you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a crazy story.
It was all about understanding. Like one, she had been looking to refinance her house, and one of them was to like help pay for, or one of the reasons was to help pay for her kids' college. And so we talked about where he was going to college, what he wanted to study, like what I was doing. Like he had no bearing in whether or not he wasn't signing the paperwork,
Yeah.
but I think that extra effort and that extra work to show that I actually cared about what happened to this family, and that's what I was in it for. It wasn't just to close a deal for commission. Like I knew how they wanted to use the money, and I knew how it was going to benefit them. And I think that extra mile, you know, goes a long way. I mean, I've talked to people in deals for 12 months, 18 months, knowing that they like weren't buyers at the time, but continuously talk to them every single month just to keep that relationship going. And so you do a lot of that. You look back and you're like, kind of was stalkerish, but that's what sales is. Like it's
Yeah.
how you build a relationship.
Yeah, that's such a lovely story. It's a fine balance between stalking and being nice.
As long as you're authentic and you're building that relationship, right? Had I not had such a great relationship with her,
Yeah.
I think calling her husband probably would have made her really mad. And same thing, like her giving me the number to talk to her son. Like I
Yeah.
think if I would have found it on my own and called him, she probably would have been like, what is
What
happening here?
the hell?
But like she knew that my like motives were pure, that we had
Yeah.
talked for so long and like it. But yeah, there are a lot of bad tactics that people use, and it's not one that I would advocate for. Don't go calling your prospect's family just out of nowhere. But if
Yeah.
it makes sense and like you've earned that right, like why not?
Yeah. Yeah, no, lovely story. What's one piece of startup advice you think is totally overrated?
The startup advice that, not even advice that people are given, but I think that so many founders run into is that mentality of if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And like it's it's really fascinating talking to so many founders and being parts of these communities, but seeing how pervasive it still is. And like you're then facing this like uphill battle. And I think gone are the days, and maybe this is the actual advice that are given that I think is overrated. Gone are the days of building an MVP that like doesn't actually work that people are willing to pay for. I don't think that it doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles, but a lot of people will tell you like build the jankiest version of your product ever. That worked 5 years ago when interest rates were low and companies were endlessly funded and able to purchase without remorse. But the bar is so much higher today. And you're not going to get by with what would have worked 5 years ago. It's not to say that you can't, like, you shouldn't build an MVP. Like, you don't need all the bells and whistles, but it needs to have some of those elements of like user experience and UI and design for people to want to take a chance on it. And I think that was what I learned in my experience was like building the minimum product that like didn't really care about design and user experience. It was great to be able to make some videos, but if you can't get people to use it, what's the point, right? And so build something that people actually want to use, and you'll be so much more successful.
Yeah, makes sense. I heard, I mean, these days, so many new terms are coined. There's a new
Yeah,
term called MLP. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called,
I have it. What is that?
it's minimum lovable product.
Okay.
don't
I mean,
don't build a shitty MVP. Build a minimum lovable product.
MVP, MLP, like it's similar to the sales world. There is new terminology every single day that I see, and I'm like, I don't even know what any of this is. This is let's just sell. Let's just
Pick
talk
up
to
the
buyers.
phone.
Yeah, like just pick up the phone. That's the best way to do it. Like it doesn't matter if it's inbound, outbound, warm bound, near bound. I think I saw something the other day that was
Rubber
like,
bound.
here's my inspector gadget strategy. And I was like, we don't need all these things. Like, it's just sales. It's just people talking to people. That's how sales is made. Find what works for you and double down on it and figure out what's not working for you and focus on that one area to fix and determine what needs to change within that area. It's the only way that like you'll figure it out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Follow the signal. Follow the signal. Thanks for answering all the rapid fire
Or
questions. It was a fun chat and it was great to have you on the podcast. I wish you all the best for your journey ahead.
thanks, Vishesh. Yeah, no, great chatting.
If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.